and welcome to another 3 palettes, 3 looks video. You should already know which palettes I'm featuring based on the title of the video, but just in case, I'm doing Fantasy Cosmetica's The Witch is Familiar in collaboration with BattyBean, Gourmande Girls Nevermore, and Nomad Pacific Northwest. And at least 2 of these palettes are already available, I think, as you're watching this, if not all 3. So hopefully these looks and my thoughts on the palettes will help you understand the palettes a little better if you are interested in them. Or get some inspiration for looks if you've already purchased the palettes. Per usual, I will be talking you through each look, letting you know how things perform, what I'm doing, all of that kind of stuff. And then once I finish the look, I will let you know my thoughts on the palette, the color story, the quality, all of that stuff, as well as give you any swatches I've done of the palettes and all of the launch info, pricing, my codes, all of that stuff will be in the description box just to kind of save time because these videos tend to be on the longer side and I don't want to keep yapping too much in the intro. So let's get into the first look. For my look using the Nomad Pacific Northwest palette, I'm going to be doing a bit more of a simple look for a couple of reasons. First of all, I do get requests to do simple looks, so I'm going to attempt that with this palette, but I specifically want to do it with this color story because when you look at this palette, I feel like it's a more wearable color story, a more wearable palette, and obviously the always disclaimer that wearable is subjective. If you want to wear it, it is wearable, but hopefully you know what I mean when I say that because this is quite a muted and subdued color palette. You have the neutral column, you have a green column that's more muted, and same thing with the blues. They're a bit more muted and subdued along with all the shimmers. So I feel like this is a really good palette to do a simple look with. And I feel like it's been a minute since I did a blue look. So I'm going to start with this shade over here, and there is a good amount of kick up in the pan. I don't know if you saw the powder that came up when I swirled my brush in there, but I feel like, you know, that is pretty typical for Nomad mattes. Doesn't bother me. Their mattes are very, very blendable, and I feel like the powderiness is a big part of that. And that is one of the reasons I wanted to use the Nomad palette to do the simple look. I just feel like their mattes are very beginner friendly and therefore really great for quick and easy looks. Also, I'm sure you can see I've already done the step on this eye, so you can see what I'm working towards. But I will be doing the application on my right eye for all the looks. The other thing I love about Nomad's mattes is you can shear them out and do a really light layer. I could leave it right here, but I'm gonna build it up to this level bit by bit. So I dipped in one more time and I'm really focusing it in the deepest part of my crease. I have quite deep set eyes, so when I'm applying eyeshadow, I don't like to look straight ahead because my crease gets swallowed. I look down into the mirror that I'm using over here, put it in that deepest part, but you can see the brush kind of gets swallowed up. So I have to keep looking down like this or raise my eyes to get that pigment in there. But I don't like to blend while raising my eyes like this because then it'll take it too high up. I just keep them relaxed and then I slowly diffuse upwards once most of the pigment is off the brush. So now, typically, I would go in with a darker shade on the outer corner, but as you can see, I'm taking this same blue matte and wrapping it all the way around my eye like this because I want to keep this look simple with minimal blending between matte shadows because I feel like that's always the trickiest part if you're a beginner is blending multiple mattes together. And if I were to take this up from a super beginner level, I would say keep it monochromatic. Just use a dark blue on the outer corner. But with this palette, I could use the green shade down here. I could use this to deepen up with. There are other options. Taking that same blue matte on a little pencil brush, and I'm just softly diffusing it on my lower lash line. I'm not getting too much pigment down here. You could leave your lower lash line bare if you want to, but I feel kind of naked without any eyeshadow down here, and I promise you it doesn't look weird. As I think Lynn's makeup look says this, she's like, it doesn't look weird, you're just not used to it, or I can't remember what her exact phrase is, forgive me, but it's so true. Once you start doing it, I feel like there's no going back. Now I'm gonna stay true to my word and not blend any deeper mattes into this blue, but this blue, even though it's muted, it's just a little too light for me to wear on its own. I like more definition, depth, and contrast in my looks to feel comfortable in them on my complexion. I just feel like, I don't know, with like the contrast of my skin and my hair, it's just like the super light looks don't look quite right on me. But if that's your jam, you can leave it here. You don't have to do this next step. What I'm going to do is I am going to be using a darker matte, but I'm not going to be blending with it. I'm just going to be doing a liner with it. So I'm going to dip into this shade over here. I also sprayed my brush with setting spray to intensify the powder so that it goes on deeper. And I'm just going to roughly sketch along my lash line. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to talk and do this precisely. You can do it without setting spray, but I just feel like it intensifies it to more of a proper liner depth. And also you don't need to be precise with this because we are going to be covering it with shimmer a little bit and then reapplying it on top of the shimmer. I just feel like I like to put it under the shimmer to really give that like definition to the eye. Then I'm taking a dry brush with the same dark blue eyeshadow and running it just very lightly here on the lower lash line. You can again skip this, but I like that extra definition and smokiness, and I kind of wrap it into the liner on the top lid. I'm going to continue keeping things simple with the shimmer and go monochromatic again. I'm going to dip into this one with my finger. I am slapping this over the entire lid. I'm not even being very precise with it because I don't mind getting shimmer in my crease, but if you don't like that, then just be a bit more careful. This shimmer is a bit on the sheer side, like it doesn't have much of a base pigment to it, so I can kind of see my lid underneath it where there's no mattes. If that bothers you, just take the matte all the way down to your lid, like onto your lid, and then apply the shimmer on top and use a glitter glue because typically shimmers will have a harder time applying over a matte than onto my lid with like my primer. And per usual, I'm using my brush to get all the way to the inside of my lid. I feel like even when I don't wear my press-ons, which I'm not right now, like it's just hard for me to get into this portion of my eye because they're so rounded and like deep set that they really curve like into my head, if that makes sense. So I always need a brush. And I'm also using this to like blend the shimmer up into my crease. Like I said, I kind of like getting shimmer up here. I like shimmer everywhere, especially because again, my eyes are deep set, so it's going to like kind of transfer up anyway. That's why I never do cut creases, because I would have to cut the crease like all the way up here for it to not transfer, which would be ridiculous. So once again, you could stop here. This is what I mean by I'm going to try to do a simple look, like give you options where you can stop, but you can also add more. And by adding more, I'm just going to be like re-intensifying this liner because I kind of covered it up a little bit with the shimmer. And even though the shimmer is sheer and you can kind of see the liner when light is not hitting my lids, I just want it to be more prominent. So I'm going to do that. Now, this is another point that you could stop at, but being myself, I need to add one final touch, and that is my signature inner corner, inner swoop shimmer. So I'm going to dip into this one over here. I'm going to pop that over here and bring it down. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I'm using a new brush for my inner corner shimmer. I got this at the Creators and Friends event. It's from Singe. It's their E11, I think. Yeah, the E11 brush, and it is my new favorite inner swoop shimmer brush. It's perfect. This shimmer I used on my inner corner, inner swoop, is so pretty because it looks like just like a neutral rosy champagne in the pan, and it is, but when you get it on the eyes, you can see that it's actually quite dimensional and it has like subtle multicolored sparkles. Like you won't be able to see it from far away, but it does provide this like little like oomph to the eyeshadow. Here is the finished look. I feel very like 80s if I cover up my lips, like with the bright pink cheeks and the blue eyes. If I'd gone for a brighter pink lip, it would have been like full 80s, but I went for more of like a muted mauve tone to kind of match the muted blue in the crease and keep myself from looking just like too wild. But I really like how it turned out. It is quite simple in my book. I know it might not be simple for everyone, but I feel like a lot of the time complicated looks are complicated due to matte blending, and I really tried to do as little blending with the mattes as possible. Here is Sparkle Cam and also Unexpected Shift Cam. I kind of forgot that this shimmer that I have all over my lid does shift a little bit to this purple, and there are these additional icy white sparkles within the blue that give it this like brilliant texture and iciness to it, this coolness to it, and makes it very, very bright. It's gorgeous. And hopefully you can see with the inner swoop shimmer those multicolored sparkles that I was talking about too. So now let me give you some thoughts on this palette. It is inspired by the Pacific Northwest, which I have only visited once. It was actually last summer. I went up to Seattle, and obviously Seattle's a city, but we drove from Seattle up to Vancouver. We crossed the border, so we drove through a lot of just like the countryside, I guess, and like, I don't know. I know like the Pacific Northwest is very romanticized, but this does give me those vibes. I definitely think the color story fits, like it hits the mark. Now, at the time of filming this, the palette has not been revealed, but the first thing that I thought of when I opened up this palette, and what I am going to go out on a limb and assume people are going to think, is that this resembles Ghost Town, also from Nomad. So for comparison's sake, here is Pacific Northwest next to Ghost Town, USA, and I do think that with the mattes, there is quite a bit of like similar tones. You know, you have the muted blue column, the muted green column, and then a neutral column. What I will say is that I almost feel like they are opposites, I guess, in a way, because like the neutrals in Pacific Northwest, you have that warm tone neutral, versus in Ghost Town, I feel like it's very, very cool toned and like quite, like the two browns at the bottom have always been like a critique of mine where they've been too similar. Same with the blue column. I felt like the bottom two blue mattes were a little too similar in depth. Over here, we have a bit more variety. And so I kind of feel like they may be similar, but to me, Pacific Northwest is the better iteration, and I like Ghost Town. I actually included this in my recent fall palettes roundup. I like Ghost Town, but I think Pacific Northwest will be replacing it because I like the matte selection better. And more importantly, I think the shimmers in Pacific Northwest are far, far better. Not only are they more sparkly and just better quality overall, but there are no squishy shimmers in Pacific Northwest, and Ghost Town does have a couple of squishy shimmers. And in my ideal world, I think my perfect matte selection would be some kind of combo of the two palettes, but overall, if I had to pick between the two, I would pick Pacific Northwest, which is good to hear. It's good to hear that the brand is improving. They're not going backwards. Like if they're going to release something that's a little bit reminiscent of an older palette, I'm glad that they are improving on it. I also think not only is the quality of the shimmers better in this palette, but the variety I think is better. I feel like in Ghost Town, which I already put down, but you've seen it, I feel like the shimmers, like some of them are a little too close to each other, and over here it's just like you have more options. And of course, the matte quality is just as good as ever. If anything, it has gotten better with more recent palettes. They are creamier, softer, easy to blend, more pigmented. They build easier on top of each other. And so I'm very happy with this palette overall. If you have Ghost Town, do you need this? Probably not. I mean, that's up to you to decide. I'm not going to tell you whether you need it or not. You know, that is entirely your decision. But if you don't have Ghost Town, I think this is just the better option. Also, going back to the shimmers, this one over here, I think is the only like true multichrome, because it's a black-based multichrome and it really does shift like all these different colors, gold to green to teal. And the rest of the shades, some of them are like a little shifty, but not like true multichromes. A couple of them have some like multicolored sparkles, like I said, but they're not super visible, but they are very sparkly and dimensional, and like, I'm happy to see Nomad making better and better shimmers. I already mentioned that the formula of the shimmers in here, none of them are squishy, but some of them are actually a bit on the drier side. Like this one over here that I put on my lids today was a bit drier, and because of that, I felt like, you know, when I applied it, it's more of this like sheer scattered sparkly finish, which I think worked for like the more simple type of look that I was going for today. But I do think like to intensify this, you could either spray your brush, put it on top of a glitter glue, that kind of thing to amp it up. And I don't think a dry formula is bad. If anything, like if you have issues with creasing, it's probably preferable. I also think that this is a great counterpart to their Halloween release. I think it was Witch City Salem was the name of the palette. That one was so bright, dark, colorful, and warmer overall. And I feel like this is the complete opposite. It's subdued. It's more cool toned. It's like has some neutrals in it. It's more wearable. And so I feel like between the two palettes, they've covered like both sides of makeup lovers. So I do appreciate that. For this look, I'm using the Gourmande Girls Nevermore palette, and I'm going to start with this deep, smoky, purple, gray type of shade over there. And as you can probably see from my other eye, I'm going to be packing this over my entire lid. I actually only had to dip into the pan once to completely cover that eye, because unlike when I always say I'm a build and blend girly, and I usually start with a matte eyeshadow in my crease. And yes, when I'm blending a matte in the crease in that way, I want it to be really diffused, and so I start slowly and I work my way up. But this is going all over my lid, and I want like a really even, not thick layer, but like opaque layer, I guess, because it's going to be a base for shimmer, so I'm not worried about building slowly. But I am going to just like softly blend the edges just into the socket. I'm not being very precise at all because I'm going to use a different shade to blend out. I just kind of want to get the process started. Now I'm going to use the same brush, which I did wipe off. This is the Singe E08, which you can see is flat on one side, and that's the side I used to pack on this dark shade. And I'm going to use like the more tapered end to pick up this shade over here. And with this shade, I'm pretty much just going to be blending out the darker matte, really taking my time, and depending on the formula of the shadow and how much I use and all that, whenever I do this technique where I put like a dark matte all over the lid and then I use a lighter one to blend it out, sometimes I need to go back and forth between the two, work in light layers. This is where my build and blend style comes into play, just to get like, you know, the exact soft edge that I want, because when working with such deep dark shades, like I don't like to take it as far out or make it look as dramatic as I do with my more like smoky matte blends, I guess, when I use like a lighter shimmer on the lid. I like to keep it a bit tighter to my eye shape because I want the drama to come from the lid itself. So I picked up a little bit more of that light gray. I'm going to do some here on the outer corner, and then you can use a more precise brush to be more careful over here, but I'm just going to go for it because these mattes are blending quite easily. And I will say I'm using a different eye primer than usual. I'm using the Ulta Beauty Matte Eye Primer, which I've been using here and there off camera for some looks. I find that I get softer blends with it. Like, my usual eye primer is the Milani one, and I just feel like things stick down a bit more on that one. It's very interesting. Now I'm going to dip back into that first matte just the tiniest bit, and this time I did take it on the tapered edge, and I'm going to stamp that over here on the outer corner where I lost a little bit of depth from the blending, and then slowly bring it inwards like this, and then just keep blending. I'm using very tight, repetitive motions to get a soft blend that doesn't go too far out. And again, you can use a more precise brush for this if you have smaller eyes or whatever, but I find from my eye shape, this type of brush works really well. And in general, like, I got this at the Creators and Friends event as PR, but this brush shape is so unique and interesting, and I definitely want to pick up another one. Using the same shades in the lower lash line, starting with the deeper one over here on the outer half, and then switching to the lighter matte to blend inwards up till about here. That's all for my matte work for now, so I'm going to move on to shimmers, and I'm picking up this shade over here, which has this beautiful fiery shift, and it's on this sheer, like, murky, smoky base, and I wanted to intensify that. That's why I laid down this matte first. And I'm not using any kind of glitter glue or tacky base in between the matte and the shimmer, just because I don't really like to, and I find that, you know, it is sticking down without any kind of glitter glue. I just might have to go in a couple times, but you absolutely can if you want to. And the other reason that I don't like to use a glitter glue is because when I do this style of shimmer matte layering, I like to take the shimmer all the way up into the crease like this. It kind of like diffuse it with my shader brush. And I feel like when I use a glitter glue on the lid and I stop it like right here, there's like kind of a harsh line over there, like where it ends, and I don't want that. I also like to take the shimmer all the way to the very edge of my lid and then kind of tap it out a little bit to diffuse it. I find with a lot of indie eyeshadow formulas that are a bit more like not oily, but like have some emollients to them. I don't really need to use a glitter glue when I layer them over mattes, but with drier formulas, that is when I will use a glitter glue, because with drier formulas, I feel like there's not enough binder and enough like creaminess for them to stick down on top of the mattes. For my inner corner, I typically like to do a shimmer, but the only shimmer that was light enough in the palette to work in my inner corner was this one that I used on my lid, and I don't want to put the same thing, so I think I'm actually going to do a matte inner corner, and I'm going to dip into this periwinkle shade over here. I'm really packing it on over here and bringing it down here just like I do with shimmers, but I'm gonna get some off, match this eye, but only when there's like less pigment left in the brush and I'm even wiping some off am I going to bring it up through the swoop, because I don't like to put like a ton of matte here, but I do want it to like connect and kind of like connect to my crease and fill in this gap over here. Otherwise I feel like it just looks bare, but I don't want it to be like super punchy. And now, because I feel like the look is a little unfinished and I want to try one last thing, I'm going to dip into this shimmer over here. And I sprayed the brush with some setting spray, and now I'm going to take that along my lower lash line, but just lightly. I'm not building it up a lot. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it through the camera, like on screen, but in person, it just added like a soft wash of smoky sparkle down there. And I felt like the darker matte that I used did not give me enough depth on my lower lash line that I wanted personally for this look. And that shimmer has quite a deep base, so adding like a soft wash of that just kind of like smoked things out a little bit. And I love the little like twinkle of cool gray blue sparkles. I feel like it really ties everything together. Here is the final look. I love how this turned out. I don't do matte inner corners often, and now I'm questioning why. I think it's probably because I am a sparkle goblin and I'm like, I can't resist adding more shimmer. And I feel like because I only had one shimmer on my lid and the matte inner corner, that's why I was like, I have to put more on, and I put more on the lower lash line. But maybe that's a compromise I can make for future looks, because I really do like how this turned out. And I love like all the contrast and everything. Very happy. Do you see the shift on my lid shimmer? It is actually bonkers. It goes all the way from this like almost reddish, like orangey pink, to a proper orangey peach, to this chartreuse almost green. The shifts actually remind me of Dieverune's Stray Cat, but Stray Cat is even more sparkly and punchy, like more shiny than this, which is more, this one is more glowy, I would say. Also, I feel like you can see the shimmer on my lower lash line kind of peeking out over there as I move my head. It's not like a thick layer, just like a scattered sparkle, and I love it. So now let's talk about the Nevermore palette. I'll be honest, as of doing this look, I have not even swatched this palette. It was very much like a first impressions, and I did kind of just like finger swatch every shade before I actually used it, just to get a feel for it, because I do feel like through my, years now of swatching and applying shadows, swatching them really does help me get a feel for how they're going to perform. It kind of gives me an indication. So before I put them on my eyes, I just wanted to like touch them and feel them. Even though I have used Gourmande Girl palettes, like several of them now, and I kind of know how their formulas perform, but I just wanted to make sure that they were the same as those previous palettes. And from the shades that I used today, I can say that they are. If anything, the mattes were even more buttery soft than the ones that I've used in the past, especially like this shade over here and this shade. They were just like so like creamy and like genuinely buttery to the touch. I also did swatch this shade as I was trying to figure out what I wanted to layer this over. I did like a couple of tests on the back of my hand. So I swatched that one and this one just quickly in the back of my hand, and those were also very soft. And I don't know if this is like an updated formula or it's just like these specific shades are that soft. And I don't mean soft in a bad way, soft in like a very blendable way, because you saw this is quite a deep dark shade. And even though I put it all over my lid, and typically I like to use like a lighter shade to blend it out, and sometimes I have to go back and forth and work in small layers to get a really good blend, I did not have to do that with this palette. I think I just had to dip into this once, maybe twice, to finish out the outer corner, and that was it. It blended really well. But I do kind of want to put like a disclaimer as well. I am using a different eye primer than I usually do. I have used the Ulta primer a handful of times in the past, but I don't think I've ever used it with Gourmande Girls formulas, and I do feel like this primer just gives me like a smoother base to blend over, if that makes sense. I don't know if it's because it's a matte eye primer, but yeah, as far as the color story goes, I think it's really pretty. It's perfect for this time of year, for spooky season. And when I first opened up, it actually kind of reminded me of It's Freaking Bats from Shoud, Betty Jean's collaboration, which is funny because the third palette in this video that I'm going to use is her upcoming collab with Fantasy Cosmetica. But this feels almost like an expanded version of It's Freaking Bats. Like, it just kind of reminds me of it without being like fully like that, if that makes sense. Obviously because this is a bigger palette, but especially since that palette is not available any longer. And if you feel like, oh, you always wanted that color story or you missed out on it, maybe this could satisfy that want. I will say though, this is definitely for the moody, spooky, grungy lovers because there are just not a ton of lighter shades in this palette, both in the mattes as well as the shimmers. Like I said, because I used this shimmer all over my lid, there was no lighter shimmer to do an inner corner with. Like all of these are quite dark, if not proper black based shadows, especially this one over here. And even with the mattes, like dark, mid-tone dark, 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 dark. This shade and this shade are the only true light shades. Like this is quite light on me, but if you have a fair skin tone, it may not be as light. And this is more of like a mid-tone, but overall it is very moody and grungy. So you definitely have to like those kinds of tones to like this palette, at least as a standalone palette. I feel like in my day-to-day, like outside of these videos where I'm testing out a specific palette, I have no problem combining palettes, but I just want to point it out. It's also quite a grayed out palette. Like you do have the pop over here and the pop over here, but a lot of these deeper shades have some like gray in them. Like that looks like a proper gray. That looks like a grayed out navy. That's a grayed out purple. Even this like tealish green shade over here is a little desaturated. This I would say is kind of a desaturated shade too. So it's definitely kind of like that. It feels almost like it's just very spooky. I just did a quick little finger dip swatch to test out the remaining shimmers just to make sure that they are not squishy or oily. Happy to report that none of these are that type of formula. They aren't like dry by any means, but they're not overly emollient. And this one is very, very smooth. This one's pretty smooth as well. These three have a little bit of texture, but they smooth out on like when you pick them up. Overall, I do quite enjoy this color story, though I do think personally I will end up combining this palette with other palettes, even potentially the Trapped palette that came out right before this one, the other Halloween launch from Gourmande Girls, because that is quite a bright palette and it has more lighter tones in it, so I think it could fill in the gaps that this palette does not have. And like this is more muted, that's brighter, which like I love to play with the contrast between those tones. So I do think that they are like good back-to-back releases for the brand. For this look, I'm using the Witch is Familiar palette from Fantasy Cosmetica in collaboration with BattyBean here on YouTube, and I want to do something kind of ambitious. We'll see if it works out, but I want to try to combine as many of the colors in this palette, like really encapsulate the whole color story and do something a bit more fun and colorful and creative, because I feel like I want to do a very BattyBean look, you know? And I'm going to start with this purple matte over here. I am focusing it over here on the inner part of my crease and kind of like bringing it almost down a little bit, not quite into the inner swoop, but just kind of like buffing it out a little bit. And then doing the same on this side. I don't want to take it all the way out. I'm actually going to leave this little part right here bare like I have it on this lid. Kind of just feather it out in this direction as well. I'm not doing a full like matte crease this time. Dip back in another time and I'm bringing it a little bit lower, like really tucking it into the socket of my eye like that. Per usual with Fantasy Cosmetica mattes, they are a bit on the thinner side, but still pigmented and buildable, as you can see here. And I do want to mention, for me specifically, purples are a bit tricky. They can sometimes like go a little gray on me and have trouble showing up, especially like lighter purples or midtones. So I don't think that this is like, you know, a non-pigmented shade or anything like that. It's just my specific situation with purples. Next, I'm going to pick up this deeper red maroon matte over here. So I'm going to be doing a wing to match this side. And honestly, I kind of just need to lock in and do the wing because it's really hard for me to do a wing and talk at the same time. It just requires so much precision. And I'm probably just going to overlay footage of me doing that because, yeah, I am not skilled enough to talk and do a wing at the same time. Okay, are the wings perfect or even? No, but I don't really care because I don't think anyone's going to be looking at them as closely as I am anyway. Now I'm going to move over to the shimmers, and I'm going to start with this beautiful purple shade over here. With this shade, I'm kind of filling in the part of my lid that's bare over here, but I'm only taking it till about like, how do I explain this? I start at like where this liner ends over here, and I bring it up like this at a diagonal angle to meet the crease, and then I fill in all of this area over here up until the outer part of my crease. I hope that makes sense. I don't know why that was so hard for me to explain. You could probably get more pigment faster by using your finger, but I want to be super precise here, which is why I'm using the brush and just working in small thin layers. Especially when it comes close to the wing, I'm doing my best to not cover it up. It's okay like if it overlaps a little bit, but I do want the wing to remain mostly matte. And then when there's not like a lot left on the brush, then I fully feather it out like this over here. I just wiped off the brush and I'm picking up this pink shimmer now. And I'm placing this shimmer on the inner third of my lid that I left bare, like this, and bringing it all the way up into the crease almost. Picked up a bit more, and then I'm going to blend it into that other purple shade. I just, like, these shades are like kind of not sister shades, but like, you know, in similar color families, I guess, with the one that I'm applying right now being lighter. And I just like to keep the inner half of my lid really bright and light to kind of bring it forward, since my eyes are so deep set and kind of curve into my face. And so that's why I didn't bring the purple all the way in. And also because I wanted to keep, or like pull more pink into the look. Now I'm switching back to the mattes because I want to pull in some blues, specifically this like turquoise aqua shade up there. It is so vibrant and beautiful. I'm applying this shade on my lower lash line, focusing it over here, and then tapering it off as I get towards the maroon, because these two colors don't mix well and I don't really want to blend them together much. Then finally picking up this teal shimmer over here, and that's going in my inner corner, and I'm dragging it onto the teal just a little bit, or the teal matte, and of course dragging it up through the inner swoop as well to meet that purple matte. Here's the final look, and I'm pretty happy with it. I feel like I did manage to put a lot of the colors from the palette onto my eyes. Like I got the reds, the purples, the pink, the teal, and I feel like I mostly stuck to the lighter shades of the palette because I didn't use, I used 3 mattes, but I guess they were like 2 of the lighter ones, and then this is really the only deepening shade I use, because I feel like when I do an eyeshadow wing, I don't like to use a ton of dark mattes, since I want the wing to be like the defining point of the look, if that makes sense. And then it's just like shimmers and lighter mattes to accent that. Here is Sparkle Cam, so you can see these beautiful shimmers. I said in my swatch post of this that the purple shimmer that I have on the outer half of my lid is such a stand-up, because I love that it's not like super deep dark, but the vibrancy of that purple is so like, it's so punchy and unique. And also that teal shade in the inner corner, I don't feel like I have a shimmer that is quite as like vibrant as that one in like how glowy teal aqua it is. Now when it comes to my thoughts on this palette, I'm gonna be honest, I don't have a ton to say, because I personally don't really like to critique or talk about creator collabs in the same way that I talk about brand only palettes, because I just feel like creators are my peers, and when we get opportunities to collab with brands to bring our visions to life, that is so personal and special that I don't feel comfortable critiquing my peers' works of art, you know what I mean? And this is a work of art. Everything from the cover, which is absolutely gorgeous, to the color story itself. And I guess one thing that I will say about this though, is that I do feel like this is a very Betty Jean color story. Like I look at this palette and I see her in it, and I love that. I think that's all I can really ask for from creator collabs. I also will say that the quality of this is on par with past Fantasy Cosmetica palettes. Everything in here performed really well, both when I was swatching as well as like doing my look today. The mattes all built up really well. The shimmers are really sparkly. This one is a bit more on like a like the metallic side, like a standard shimmer. It is shifty, like it shifts from a red to a gold, but it's just not as sparkly as the other shades. But the rest of them are like, especially this one, and this one, they're all a bit more of that like high shine textured sparkle. And then these two have like a smaller particle size, but are still sparkly. And this red one is more of that like standard shimmer formula, but everything is really, really great. That is it for this video. Let me know which of the three looks is your favorite and which of the palettes is most speaking to you, whether you're thinking of picking any of them up or whether you've already picked them up, because I do think by the time you're watching this video, at least 2 of them will already be out. So yeah, let me know. I'm going to keep the outro pretty short and sign off right here because these videos, these 3 looks, 3 palette videos tend to be on the longer side. And also I am running late. So thank you for watching till the end and I will see you in the next one. Bye.